Dear students, welcome to this session. In this lab session, we are going to look into lab program number 13, and lab program number 13 implement structures to read, write, compute average marks and the students scoring above and below the average marks for the class of n students. So first thing is we will try to understand what is the problem statement. We have to first thing is we have to use the structures. So we will briefly understand what is a structure. Using structure, we need to read, write and compute average marks and the students scoring above and below average marks for a class of n students, n number of students. Let us say there are 50 students in a particular class. We have to create a structure which will read those 50 students information like a roll number, name and marks. So we will be reading the roll number, name and marks of every student, and then we are going to display the students who are above average marks. So we are going to print all those students who are above average marks, and we are going to print the student which are below average marks. So here we need to calculate the average marks and decide who is above and who is below. According to that, we have to display. The logic here is very simple. We have all the marks. Let us say we have 50 students. Everybody is scoring like 90, 70, 75, 52, 88. So we will have, if we have 50 students, we will add all the marks and divide it by 50. So we will get the average marks. Then, and let us say average marks comes as, let's say 65. Then we will check, we will loop through every student. Let's say first student, whether his marks is greater than average marks, that is 65. If it is above 65, then we will print above the average, and if his marks is below the average, then we will check if the marks of a student is less than 65, then we are going to print as a below average marks. First thing is, here we have to understand what is a structure. Structure is a user defined data type, and if you have understood the arrays structure, I would say you can correlate. It is very similar to the array, but array is different, structures are different. Conceptually, what is the array? Array is a collection of similar entities, right? Similar in the sense we can have an array of integers, we can have array of characters, we can have array of floating point numbers. So when we make an array, we will, all the elements of that array are of same data type. If I have an integer array of size 50, then I will have 50 elements I can store which is of type integer only, and I access those array elements using the index, right? A of, if A is the array, A of 0 will A square bracket, inside the square bracket 0, I say it as A of 0. A of 0 will point to the first element, A of 1 will point to the second, A of 3 will, A of 2 will point to the third element, and so on, and the last element would be A of n minus 1. So that is a array. Similarly, what is a structure? Is a structure is a collection of different data types. In case of array, we have only one type of a data type. In case of a structure, we can have it, we can say it as a collection of different data types. For in this case, we are going to consider the student. So so we can create a data type called as a student. So student will be a one data type of a structure. So this is a user defined data type, it is called as a structure. I can create a struct is a keyword, struct. Okay, this spelling is mistake. Struct struct student. So what it will do is, this student, whatever the name you have chosen, it will become a a structure variable, and inside that I can have any kind of a information. So all this information will be grouped under this particular variable. So for example, we have a student here, and student has a roll number, he has a name, and he has marks. Those will be the members of the structures. And roll number is a integer data type, name is a string data type, and marks is a floating data type. So we can create any kind of a structure where I can group related information. For example, let us say we can, if you want to create a structure of employee, struct employee, and what are the information about the employee? Employee number, employee name, employee date of birth, employee salary, so on. So those are the different elements of the that particular structure. So when we have a variable like that, I can store a information in this each of these elements, and it is addressed by that particular variable. We are going to see that how it is done. So we'll go back to the program. So we are going to use a structure, and for using a structure, first thing that we require is a declaration of a structure. This is called as a declaration of a structure. First is hash include stdio.h, that is including standard input output header file. That is our first statement always. Then we have the declaration of a structure. This is called as a declaration of a structure, and it is done after the header file inclusion and before the main method. So how do we do the declaration? First we will see the struct, struct, it is the keyword. We have to use this keyword and space any name. You can choose any valid identifier. You know the rules for selecting an identifier. You can select any name. So here we have selected a name as a student, open curly brace, closing curly brace, semicolon, and inside what all the different type of information you want to have, that you can specify along with their data type and a semicolon. So this is similar to a declaration that we do inside the main. So inside the student we have integer roll number. Roll number is a integer data type, semicolon, and we have a string, that is a array of character, char, name, rectangular bracket, 100, that is the dimension. So maximum I can have 100 characters in name. So I use this name as a string to store the name of a student. Then I have marks. Marks we have taken it as a floating point, so that there is a possibility of decimals. So this is the declaration of a structure. Once we have structure declaration, now so this is you created one new data type. This is a user defined data type. Now you can create a variable of type student. For example, here int roll number. What is the meaning of this? I can have a variable called roll number, which is integer data type, and integer data type is what? This is a system defined data type. So I did not define it. The C programming itself, the C compiler provided this integer data type. When I say this name, this keyword space any valid identifier followed by the semicolon, the meaning of that is a variable of this is created which will have this type of a data. So this is a roll number having a integer data type. Similarly, we have created a new data type called student. Now I can have a variable which is of type student. And how to do that? Now this is the statement. When we are declaring the structure variable, again we must use the keyword struct struct space name of the variable, structural variable, this is the tag name. So whatever the tag name we have given here, that tag name you are going to use struct tag name is the student. then I will have the variable. So either I can have one variable or I can have a collection array of such variables. Suppose let us say I have struct student S1. If I have instead of having an array of variables, structure variables, I will have only one variable of type student S1. So struct space student space S1 semicolon means S1. Now I can have S1 dot roll number. That is how I can store a value into a roll number. Then I have S1 dot name, S1 dot marks. That is how I am going to access these things. Now what we have is a, instead of using a single variable, we are using a array. Now each element of this array is a data of a type student. For example, now SARR, okay, SARR is a array of structural variable student. It can store 50 such elements, student elements. Let us say at index location 0, SARR of 0 dot, I can have roll number, and SARR of 0 dot name, and so on. That is how I can access. So first we will access the index element, whichever the element you want to access using the index, and then on top of that use a dot operator. We use a dot to access this particular value. Okay. Next is we have a array of structural variables and maximum is 50. What is the meaning of this? I can have 50 students maximum. I can store 50 student information. Then I have we have to find the average marks. So I will have a variable avg which is of type float, and I also we need to add all the marks in order to find the average. I will use another variable sum, and initial value I kept it as 0.0, that is a float again, and semicolon. And I have two integer variables n and I. N is used for checking with the user how many students they want to enter, and I is used as a index in the for loop. Next, first we will prompt the user, enter the number of students. So first user will tell how many students are there using a printf statement. User will this particular statement will display it on the console saying enter the number of students. Once this message comes, after scanf will this instruction will be executed, and what the scanf will do, it will wait for the user input, okay, from the keyboard. And what kind of a data we are reading? We are reading an integer. So I have format specifier %d comma ampersand n, close the bracket and semicolon. So this is address of variable n. Inside the n I am going to capture how many students are to be read. Okay. Next, now I have to read all the data. So how many data I have to read? Suppose a user has given n as a 10, so I have to read 10 student information, and therefore the loop will go from I is equal to 0 to I less than 10, that is 9, 0 to 9, total 10 values it will read. And what kind of values we have to read? We have to read roll number, name and marks of every student. So for loop, initially I is equal to 0, I less than n I plus plus. So in the first iteration we print enter the student number %d. So I am doing here plus I plus 1. I is initially 0. So what will be printed on the monitor, on the console? Enter the student number 1, roll number, name and marks. So user will come to know he has to enter roll number, name and marks. Then I have 3 scanf. The first scanf is to read the roll number. So how do we read the roll number? first we access the first element of that array, structural variable array, and then we use the dot operator. So scanf %d ampersand SARR of I. So we have, it is an array of structure variables. So SARR of or square bracket I. So initial value is 0. So it would be ampersand SARR 0 dot roll number. So it will read the first element. So SARR of 0 is the first element dot roll number, and it is an integer data type. If you remember, we have the structure, we will show the roll number is integer, that's why we have %d. This will read into whatever the user gives the number, it will read into SARR 0, okay, the first element dot roll number. Similarly, we are going to read the name. Scanf, here the second one is a string, so we use %s, and if you remember, for string we don't put the ampersand. SARR of 0 dot name. So whatever user gives the name, it will be stored here. Then third element, scanf %f, the marks is float, that's why we have %f formal specifier ampersand SARR of I dot marks. Now for the 0th element, means that is the first student information, I have already taken from the user as a input. Now I will calculate the sum. So since we are using this loop, I will already we will calculate the sum here itself. Sum is equal to sum plus SARR 0 dot marks. So whatever has a user given the marks here, let's say user given the marks as 55, and initial value of a sum is 0. 0 plus 55 is 55. Sum will have a value of 55. Now I will be incremented to 1. 1 less than n. So our example 10. 1 less than 10, true. Again it will say enter the student number 2. Roll number, name, marks. Then what we are going to read, SARR of 1. This it is a next element, 1 dot roll number. Similarly, SARR of 1 dot name, SARR of 1 dot marks. So we are reading the second student, which is in the second element of this SARR array, right? Now we will add this new value, the second student marks, to this. Let us say second student has scored 50, and what was the value before? 55. Sum is equal to 55 plus 50, 105. I will increment to 2. 2 is less than 10. So again it will say enter the student number 3. Why 3? Because I plus 1. 2 plus 1. So this is easy to understand. Indexing is 0 to 9, but student number is 1 to 10. That is how it will display. Now it will read the next, and we will keep on adding the sum. So this loop will go until n minus 1. So in our case, if 10 is the student, up to 9, I is equal to 9, it will go, and it will read all the students. Once it completes this step, all the student information is stored in the structural array, the array of structures. It is stored there. Next step is finding the average. Okay. Next step is, once we come out of the loop, we have already the sum of all the marks, right? All the marks are summed up, divide by n. N is what? Number of student. That will give me the average value. So I found out average value. These next two statements I am using as a header, some information. Printf, the details of students above average marks. So before displaying the students marks who is having above average, I will just display this message, and after that roll number, name, marks. These are the header I am giving to the information that I am printing. Now Again I will loop through all the students for I is equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus. I will loop through all the students and I will check who are above the average. That is, if SARR again 0, I am starting from 0. We have already we took the input from user already. All the values have been read into the array. So SARR of 0 dot marks, first student dot marks greater than equal to average. If the answer is true, we are going to print all the values. What value we are going to print? First roll number, percent d, backslash t. This is a escape sequence for having a tab. And what is a tab? Tab is a few spaces. Let's say it depends on how many, what the tab size is. So it will print some spaces. Again backslash t, it will print some spaces. Then what else we are going to print? Name. Name is percent s, then marks percent f. So those are inside the double quotes, comma, and after that we need to print these three values. So we have to give three variables here. SARR of 0 dot roll number, because we are in the first loop, comma, SARR of 0 dot name, comma, SARR of 0 dot marks. Again I value is incremented. I will become now 1 less than 10, true. Now SARR 1 dot marks greater than average. Let us say the second student's marks is not above the average. If this condition is false, it will not print, because we don't have else. What it will do, it will increment the I value and it will check with the next student. So it will loop through all the students, and if it is greater than equal to average, then it will print it. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, these 7 instructions altogether, they display all the students whose marks are above average. The same set of 7 instructions are here. There is no change, only little information is different. Here we will say the details of students below average marks, right? Below average marks means what? If condition will change. Instead of here we checked greater than equal to average, here we will check SARR of I dot marks less than average. If it is less than average, it will print. So these statements together, all these statements together, it will display all the students whose average marks is below the average marks. Okay. Now the last statement, we are going to print the average. So the average marks is percent f, and just we will print the average, so that we will come to know whether it has done properly. So we will also know what is the average of the whole class, and this is the end of the program. Let us see the output, how we get the output. Okay, so this is the output. When you run the program, when you compile it, there are no errors. Then you execute the particular program. After executing, it will display, enter the number of students. You remember, first thing we are going to read is the number of students. In this particular case, user has given as 4 students. Then what will be displayed? Enter the student number 1, roll number, name and marks. And user will enter the roll number as 101, Peter, and marks is 78. The name is Peter. Then after once this student is done, how many we have to read? We will put the for loop, and that for loop will go for 4 students. The next student is prompted, enter the student number 2, roll number, name and marks. So second student, user gives 102, Mark 45. Third student 103, Mary 89, and fourth student 104, Joanna 49. So those are the 4 students. So what are the marks they have scored? 78, 45, 89, 49. So average marks, if you clearly see, Peter is scored 78 and Mary scored 89. They seems to be above average. Mark scored 45 and Joanna scored 49. They seems to be below average. So we will see that. Now we do the program will do the calculation. Now the details of student above average marks. Roll number, name, marks. 101 Peter 78, 103 Mary 89. The details of students below average marks. 102 Mark 45, 104 Joanna 49. And what is the average marks? Average marks is sum of all these three, all 4 divided by 4. So that comes as 65. Clearly you can see 78 and 89 are above 65.25 and these two students are below 65.25. So that is how the program will display the students above and below the average marks. Next we will see the flow chart. Okay, the flow chart here we start with the just we'll go through the program again. In the program, what are the things we have? Okay, so we have structure defined. Okay, structure student is defined. Then we have the main method and sum is initialized to 0. Then we read the number of students. Once we read the number of students, then we loop through each student. We loop through each student and we read for every student roll number, name and marks, and in the same loop we are going to add the all the marks together, and after that we are going to calculate average is equal to sum divided by n, and then we are going to display the students whose marks are above average and students whose average is below the average marks, and finally we are going to print the average mark and stop. So we begin with the main, that is the start. So in the program, in the flow chart, this is the start. After that we initialize sum is equal to 0, and normally the structure definition what you have done, we don't specify that in the flow chart, but if you want you can have this. Okay, structure struct student and all the information, and then you can have the flow chart. Read number of students n, then we start with the loop. So we read n number of students, then we start with the loop. The first instruction is I is equal to 0. So you can see here, set I is equal to 0, and then we check, this is the loop, we will check for the condition if I is less than n. If answer is true, we are going to read SARR of I dot roll number dot name and dot marks, and here SARR array of student. Okay, SARR of 50 size, that is the maximum size, and we are going to read it, and after reading this sum is equal to sum plus SARR of I dot marks. We are going to calculate the sum, and after that we are going to increment the I value. I is equal to I plus 1, and we loop back and check whether I is less than n, means that it is whether we read all the students. If it is 10, so this number will go up till 9. So I less than 9, 10. So we are going to read all the 10 students from 0 to 9, and once it becomes 11 less than is equal to this n, if this condition is false, that means what, we have read all the students. If condition is false, we go with the calculation. So this particular thing we will come as, we will calculate the average. So that is here. Once we are done with all the students, when I value becomes n, n less than n is false, means we have read all the students, it will come here. So after the execution, if this condition is false, it will directly come here. That is what is shown in the flowchart. So we calculate the average value AVG is equal to sum divided by n, and after that here I did not go through the, you need not specify all these loops here, whatever the loops we have here, just you can say all this summed up together, display the students above average marks and display the student below average marks. That is sufficient for the flowchart. Loop through all the students, that is I is equal to 0 to n minus 1, and display number 1 above average students, number 2 below average students, and after doing that display average marks. At the end, if you see, we have displayed the average marks of the whole class AVG, and then stop. You can see here, display the average marks and then stop. So this is the flow chart. Now we will look into the execution part. So as I told you before, we are using JDoodle C online compiler, and I have already entered the program in the online compiler. You can see hash include stdio.h. This is the definition of the structure student, and main method is there. All the instructions are copied, and once we have that program, we have to give the input. So in this particular kind of a in the JDoodle C online compiler, we have to give the input std inputs. So just I have given as a 2, number as a 2. What is the first value it is going to read? It is going to read number of students. Number of students is what? 2. I have given just as a 2. And once I give the number of students, I have to give the 2 student information. The roll number 101, name Ravi, and the marks 90. And the second student, roll number 109, Hari, and 30. And after doing that, if there are no errors, then you can click on the execute. And if there are any errors, if you are using the C online compiler, then it will show the errors and you can rectify those errors, and once all the errors are fixed, you will get the output. I will click on the execute. Now the program is running. Okay, you can see the output. Okay, this is the information that is already given in the standard input. Number of students 2, the details of students above average marks 101, Ravi 90, and detail of the student below average marks, roll number, name, okay, marks 109, Hari 30. Why the average marks is 60? So he is above average and he is below average. I took this example where it is very easy to understand, and we can also take the example what we just saw in our program where there were 4 students, right? I can give it as 4, and let me go back and check what was the values that were given. Okay, 101 Peter 78, 101 Peter 78. Then I have 102 Mark 45, 102 Mark 45 marks, and third student 103 Mary 89, 103 Mary 89, and the last student is 104 Joanna 49, 104 Joanna 49, I guess. Okay, it doesn't matter. Now what I will do is I will execute with that input. Okay, now you can see the output. So this is the output. We got the same output what I showed it in the the lab program. Average is 65.25, 78, 89, 45, 49. So that is what we got earlier also. Okay, so you can see the same output we got.